right, welcome everybody to Stuff It, Fantasy Basketball Podcast, part of the Old Man Squad Network, episode number 2. I'm the host, Adam King. Find me Twitter and Blue Sky at AdamKing91. Look, hopefully we've got a few things ironed out. The last episode went up on YouTube relatively smoothly. We had some issues in the background. Not issues, just delays with getting it up on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, but all good now, I believe. So, yeah, hopefully should be fairly seamless from here on. This is episode 2. So episode 1, go and check that out if you want to. We went over the 8 teams eliminated in the first round of the playoffs. Just talked about the future, I suppose. Still a lot to change between now and October, whenever the season starts next year. But I think we can sort of cover, major talking points. So I thought for this show, we'll just continue that theme with looking at the 4 teams that were just eliminated. I was waiting for Game 7, which was very early this morning, my time, between Denver and the Thunder. And the Thunder got up. Probably not that surprising given the season that they had. I thought Denver actually, they played pretty well. They were dealing with some pretty, significant to some degree injuries. Michael Porter played injured the whole playoffs. And Aaron Gordon played through a hamstring strain in Game 7. But we'll talk about that when we get to Denver. There are bits and pieces we can cover there, as well as the other 3 teams that were eliminated. First of all, BetOnline, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all your sports betting action, where lots happening at the moment. NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs, I think, still going, and baseball. I see baseball popping up all over my feed. So they're all going ahead strongly at the moment. BetOnline has more ways to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news, and scores, even live in-game betting while the games are being played. NBA playoffs, we got 4 teams left. Thunder, I would hedge my bets that they are the favourites to take this whole thing out, given Cleveland are out and Boston are out. Beyond that, I don't know. It's pretty tough. I think the East, whether you love the Knicks, whether you love the Pacers, I do have a soft spot for the Pacers, so I would love to see them get through to the NBA Finals. But yeah, look, I think the Knicks, they're not a team that I've particularly been fond of, but I do like, I like their build. They're quite shallow. I do worry that if they suffer one injury, it could impact them. But look, really looking forward to the Eastern Conference playoffs. The West, I do like the Wolves as well, but I think the Thunder will probably get up there. But plenty to bet on with the largest selection of odds on everything. NBA, we just talked about, MLB, NHL, UFC. BetOnline remains the best online source for all your sports wagering info. And then in between the games, which it seems to be a lot of games on at the moment, but in between those games, head over to the BetOnline Casino. All the Vegas-style games, poker. I've said this before. I know enough about poker. I do watch a bit of World Poker Tour when I get the chance. Live casino. Everything you need. BetOnline. The game starts here. All right, let's get into these teams. We have 4 of them. Now, were there any upsets? Look, yes and no, I guess. Where do we want to start? Let's start with the East, because the East has been done and dusted for a few days now. Let's start with the Pacers series. Pacers were impressive. Cleveland were probably pretty underwhelming. Darius Garland dealing with a toe injury there that he played through it, but he was pretty clearly limited. Look, the Pacers, their offense was firing. If they can continue that through to the second round, I think that they at least are in with a good chance of beating the Knicks. I think the Knicks will be the favourites, and rightfully so. But the Pacers, as we know, they're all about offense. And I actually thought their defense was pretty good during that second round matchup against Cleveland. Aaron Nesmith playing a pretty key role there. They have Miles Turner, who is one of the best. He's a good rim protector. So look, I think they're in with a shot. But let's look at Cleveland, who were eliminated, finished the regular season or came out of the regular season with the number one seed in the East, had a very good regular season. I think they were one of those teams through the regular season that I was always a little bit skeptical, only because their roster didn't really change from last year to this year. They were a good team last year. This year they were healthy. I think that's sort of where we need to start. Not really. Just running through their depth charts there weren't any significant injuries. There were missed games here and there. Strus missed a bit of time, but their key four players, Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen, were all relatively healthy. I think Jarrett Allen played in every game from memory. So that's always a positive start. You can be healthy, you win games, and I think that's a little bit of a smokescreen here with Cleveland's season. Not taking anything away from them, they were very good, but I wasn't completely surprised that they didn't bottom out in the playoffs, but they probably didn't meet those expectations. Moving forward, what happens with this roster? Look, I don't think there's any significant changes coming. They're not particularly young, but they're not old either. Donovan Mitchell will be 29, Jarrett Allen 27. They don't have any of these really young players, 21, 22. Mobley will be 24. Darius Garland will be 25. So I think they're still positioned to run it back. They probably need to add some depth. Max Strus, look, he was fine. He's 29, but he is who he is at this point. He's not a reliable scorer. I thought he had his moments. But I do think they need to just add a couple of pieces, maybe one piece. Ty Jerome proved himself as a fairly good backup point guard / shooting guard. So I think he'll stick around. He'll play a pretty big role for them. That fifth starter is where they could upgrade. Who do you get? I'm not sure. But fantasy value, I guess if we're projecting to next season, I think it's just a repeat of what we saw this year. I think Garland, Mitchell, Mobley, Allen, they're all, like I said, they're not super young, but they're also not at that age where they're going to start tailing off, I don't think. So I think we can just expect pretty similar seasons from all of them. Of course, that will depend on if and who they add. But based on the roster now, I don't see them really bringing in a superstar as such. So I don't think anyone's going to come in and all of a sudden Donovan Mitchell is averaging 15 points. Nothing like that is going to happen. So I think we're fairly safe. We'll project these guys, Donovan Mitchell, top 20, Garland, top 40. Mobley, I suppose, is the one who could continue to ascend. I think I don't know if I'd call this a breakout season for him, but it was what we had hoped would come probably 12 months earlier. Just took him a little bit longer to get there. Probably a new coach unlocked that a little bit. So maybe he can increase scoring a little bit. Defensive player of the year. So, I mean, his defensive stats are going to stick around for the foreseeable future. He is probably the one I think could push inside the top 20. Where did he end this season? Let's have a look. Relatively healthy as well. Always been relatively healthy. Okay, let's have a look. So he finished this season as the 32nd ranked player. 79 games. So yes, he was healthy. 18.5 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists, almost a steal, 1.5 blocks. Where can the improvements come? Well, he went from 15.7 to 18.4. Can he get that up to 20? Possibly. If he can work on that perimeter shot, he was certainly a career high from the perimeter, 1.3 threes. Prior to that, it was 0.4, 0.3, 0.3. So that's obviously an element of his game that he's working on. Does that push to 1.5 threes? Field goal percentage, 56. He's always, well, the last 3 years he's been in that mid 50s, so around 55, 56%. So I think he just hovers there. If he's going to continue to shoot threes, I don't think he pushes up to be a 60% field goal guy, but mid-50s is absolutely fine. The free throws, look, it makes sense. He's improved every year from the line. Can he get that up to 75? I don't see why not. That probably bumps him up to 19 points, maybe 19 and a half. So I don't think we're going to see a big increase in any one category here from Mobley, but maybe a slight increase in points. Rebounds could push to 10. He's at 9.2. He was at 9.4 the year before. The assists, I think, will hover around that 3, and that's not a bad number for a centre/power forward. Defensive stats, he was at 2.4 combined, which is sort of in the range he's been his whole career. With Jared Allen there, it makes those block numbers hard in terms of can he push to 2? I think he could if Jared Allen wasn't there, but as long as Allen's there, I don't think he can. 1.6, maybe he gets to a steal. So, look, I think slight increases across the board, and when you're the 32nd ranked player, that maybe pushes you into that second round. So I do think we may see an increase there from him. All right, let's look at Boston. Okay, Boston. All right. Look, another team that was probably a little bit disappointing, and I think most of us were probably of the opinion that the regular season didn't mean a lot for the Celtics. Given that they had won the season before, they were just looking to sort of secure a top 2 spot, which they did fairly comfortably. First round went as planned. Second round did not. So, yeah, look, actually a little bit to talk about here for the Celtics. Let's start with the obvious one, Jason Tatum. Of course, tore his Achilles in game 4. Would they have won with him? I'm not sure. The Knicks probably were on top anyway, and there was a couple other issues going on in the background there with Boston, which we'll touch on in a minute. But Tatum is the obvious one. Achilles probably means he's going to miss the majority of next season. I'm just going to take these off because I don't need them on, except for the music. Let's put them there. I don't want to look like an idiot. So Tatum, look, he's going to miss the majority of next season. So what does this mean for Boston? I think there were some question marks anyway regarding their roster and the money they've got invested. Jaylen Brown is going to be the guy next year. So we've seen enough from him to know that he can be that guy. Can he be that guy consistently on a night-to-night basis like Jason Tatum is? That remains to be seen. But I do think that Jaylen Brown obviously gets a bump next year in fantasy leagues. Just bringing up his numbers. Okay. 73rd this season, 58 the season before, 34 the season before that. Is that where we're looking at sort of numbers, I suppose? He was at 26.5 points that year. 7 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 1.1 steals. What has changed in the last 2 years? Well, his scoring has come down, but that is because the addition of Derek White, Kristaps Porzingis, Drew Holiday. So his scoring is almost certainly going to push back up into that range, 25, 26 a game. I think the rebounds probably stay around 6.5 to 7. This was a career year for him in assists, 4.4. He probably hovers around that number. He will do a bit more scoring, but he does handle the ball a little bit more. He's always been a 1.1 steals kind of player that probably just stays the same. Field goal percentage is where he dropped off a little bit this year. He went from 50 last year to 46 this year. If he's going to be shooting the ball more, what happens there? Free throw percentage, he's around 76. He has been his whole career. The 23-24 season was a bit of an outlier. He was at 70, but he probably hovers around those mid-70s. If he could push up to 80, that would help. So what are we looking at? 26 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, a steal. It's probably enough to put him inside the top 40, which I think is where you want to be targeting, maybe top 30. There is upside there, obviously. He is still only 28. So he is probably the guy that takes the biggest bump up. Derek White, I think, will do a little bit more, but he'll just hover in that same range as he has the last couple of years. The question marks, I think, are Porzingis, Drew Holiday. What happens? Are they still around? I don't know. I feel like they're going to have to let go of a piece here to be able to keep the core together. I don't think it's Derek White. I don't think it's Jaylen Brown. I don't think it's Jason Tatum. I think it's Holiday or Porzingis. Now, I mentioned earlier that the Celtics had a couple other things going on in the background here during the playoffs. Porzingis and, as it turns out, Jaylen Brown were both dealing with ailments. Jaylen Brown we knew about. We didn't know the significance of it, so he was dealing with a partially torn meniscus. I expect he probably undergoes some sort of procedure, but I don't see that limiting him in terms of being ready for next year. So Porzingis is the weird, well, not weird, but he had an illness, weeks ago, months even. Kept him out for, it was a significant portion of the season. He came back, never really looked right. Even in that game 5, I believe it was, Joe Mazzulla came out and said Porzingis couldn't breathe. It's a bit worrying. What is this? Was this COVID? Did it hang around? So we haven't really had a lot of clarity on exactly what the illness was. And is this something that's going to linger? We've heard of people getting long COVID. Is that what we're calling it? Long COVID. So it's just something to tuck away in the back of your mind for next season if he is back. If we don't hear anything, that's probably good news. But is he even here? I don't know. It's a tough situation for them because I think Porzingis, as we saw last year, he wasn't 100% healthy, but he was at least playing well, and they won. This year, he was not playing a lot of minutes. He wasn't playing well. He was basically a non-factor, so they had to lean on Al Horford, who we know is coming towards the end of his career. I thought Luke Cornett played well, but I don't think he's a starting center in the NBA. Drew Holiday is, again, he'll be 35, so he's pushing towards the back end of his career. Still a very impactful player, but production-wise, he's not the same guy he was 2-3 years ago, but still plays a key role for this. But, yeah, look, do they need to bring in another scorer? Who can step up off the bench? Peyton Pritchard is the obvious one. Does he start? That's a pretty small lineup if they start him. Without Jason Tatum, I don't know. There's some question marks here. There were questions before the Tatum injury, and now I think there's more questions. Because without Tatum, it's going to be hard. But their window to win is not... Look, it's not 5 years. Like they want to win even without Tatum there. Do they have the players there to do that? Can they afford it? So some question marks there, but I do think Jaylen Brown is the one that takes a bump. Derek White just solidifies in that role. Pritchard will definitely be draftable. Top 100, I would think. Sorry, looking at my phone there. So that's probably where we are with Boston. Okay, let's look at the West. So the Thunder, so they beat the Nuggets, obviously. Do we want to start there or do we want to start with... No, let's start with the Warriors. So Warriors were beaten, I would say, fairly convincingly, which I wasn't really surprised at. I think when Jimmy Butler came into the team months ago, I talked about the fact that he would probably push them into the playoffs, but I don't think he'll get them over the hump. Now, they did have injuries. Obviously, Steph Curry missing majority of that series played a huge role. So would they have beaten the Wolves with Steph Curry? I don't think so. It would have been more competitive. I'm pretty certain of that. But where do the Warriors go? Steph Curry is 37. Jimmy Butler will almost be, well, he might be 36, 5 months. Yeah, probably 36. Draymond Green, almost 36. Even Buddy Hield will be almost 33. So they are a team that doesn't really have youth on their side. They have said that they want to run this core back of Curry, Butler, Draymond. But honestly, they've probably got one more year to do that. Do they have the pieces around them to push them into that next level? I I'm not convinced. I thought Pajemski was probably the shining light, bright spot if we want to look at this season in terms of players that made a name for themselves. Started the season quite poorly. I think coming into draft season, we were relatively high on him. We thought he was going to start. He was going to get a lot of shots. Now, this was without Jimmy Butler, of course. But he was just pretty rough to start the year. He didn't drop out of the rotation, but he was moved to the bench. His fit was sort of weird, and then injuries, some shuffling actually opened up a starting spot for him, and he grabbed it and he ran with it. So he was very good to close the season, Brandon Pajemski. I'll just pull up his numbers here. Now, obviously in the playoffs, he played well, but Steph wasn't there. That makes a difference. But if we do look at his last month, 2 months, 3 months of the season, he was in that top 100 range. And I think that's probably where you look at him for next year. Probably similar to Peyton Pritchard. He's a guy you can get towards the back end of drafts. He will get you some points. He's a good rebounder. Free throws could be better, but I think he's only 22. So arrow is pointed upwards for Brandon Pajemski, so he will be draftable. Steph Curry, look, he'll go inside the top 20, top 15 again. Jimmy Butler, he'll be a curious one because coming into this year, I think we were a bit cautious on him because of the injuries. He seems to like it in Golden State. He was basically injury-free. There's questions there about were Miami being too cautious with him? Did he not want to be there? And so he just wasn't motivated to play, which for Jimmy Butler, that wouldn't be surprising. But he probably goes in a similar range, top 40. Yeah, probably top 40, I want to say. Draymond Green will be top 100. Doesn't score, but gets you some assists, rebounds, steals, and blocks. So I don't think a lot is going to change here. Pajemski is probably the one that pushes up draft boards. Buddy Hield, I'm not interested in him. The center spot is curious. So Draymond Green, where I'm looking here, he's listed as their center, but he's not a center. Who is their center? Trace Jackson-Davis coming into the year was the guy we targeted. He had moments, but at points throughout the season, you couldn't play him. I'm not sure what they do. Do they bring in a center? I don't know. Kevon Looney is not playable or fantasy relevant or anything like that. Quinton Post is interesting. He played pretty well down the stretch. Didn't play a lot in the playoffs, but I thought to end the regular season, he played quite well. He can spread the floor. That's the point of difference here. Kevon Looney, Trace Jackson, even Draymond Green, I wouldn't call him a floor spacer. I think Quinton Post does that. He's a big body. He's not a great rim protector, but he does at least create that space for Steph to go to work, for Jimmy Butler to go to work. So he is intriguing. If we were to get word that he is going to start at center and play 26 minutes a night, I think I'd be drafting him with a last round pick, but we don't know if that's what their plan is. Jonathan Kuminga is the other one, very up and down this season. Had an injury, played well in the playoffs, but he was out of the rotation at points throughout the season and even in the playoffs. So what is his future? Is it in Golden State? I'm not even sure of that. So he is someone that has an interesting fantasy game. His points only, doesn't do a lot on the defensive end, doesn't hit a ton of threes. So I think you could take a flyer on him. I just don't see them inserting him the team inserting him into the starting lineup permanently based on what we saw and reading the tea leaves this year. That could change. Moses Moody, I thought, was fine this season, but I haven't seen enough from him to go, oh, yeah, look, if he starts and plays 30, we have to draft him. He'd be on the radar, but I don't think we have to consider him someone we're targeting. Let's finish up with Denver. They were bundled out tonight. What are we at? 24 minutes. Yeah, that's fine. All right, we'll go for another 5-10 minutes. Interesting season for Denver. Obviously, the firing of Mike Malone was very curious. I did like the fact that Denver came out almost straight away. They were very transparent with the reasons behind it. And sure, it was a different direction for them. I do think that Adelman will be their coach. I thought he did really well with the roster that he had. They obviously got within one game of the conference finals against a very good Thunder team. They were dealing with a couple of injuries. I do think he will be their coach moving forward. Let's look at the roster. Jokic, we don't need to talk about him. We know who he is. He's absolutely fine. Aaron Gordon, don't think we need to talk about him. He is probably someone that's drafted very key for this team, but doesn't always translate to fantasy. But he'll go in the back end of drafts. Michael Porter was pretty good this year, I want to say, without being fantastic. I think we've figured out who he is at this point. He will be 27 coming into the season. Just curious to pull up his numbers. He's certainly not an exciting fantasy player, but he's solid enough. He was 102nd this year, 96 the year before, 104 the year before that. So you probably drafting him in the top, well, obviously top 100, top 80 range. This would depend on your build, and are you looking for upside or just a bit of safety? 17 points this year, 7 rebounds. Doesn't do anything defensively. Good from three. So he gets you 2.5 to 3 threes. Free throws, I think, they're pretty inconsistent across his whole career. 76 this year, 84 last year, and 80 the year before that. So do we just split the difference and call him an 80% free throw shooter? If he'd been at 80 this year, he's probably a top 90 player, maybe top 80. So I think that's where we take him again. Not much changes for him. Christian Braun, he was very good this year. There were a few moments throughout the season where we thought, okay, he's regressing to what we thought he might be coming into the season. But he was really good. Just pulling up his overall numbers here. Definitely draftable next year. So he was the 83rd ranked player this year. Does a little bit more defensively, 1.1 steals. 15 points, 5.4 rebounds, 2.6 assists, 81 from the line, 56 from the field. That would be the question, I think, for me next year is, does that field goal percentage hold? Because last year he was at 46. Year before he was at 49. Now, that was obviously a very small sample size because he was only playing 15 minutes a game. So he stepped into a much larger role this year. He went from 20 minutes to 35. And his field goal percentage went up 10%. So that is interesting and something that you need to put in the back of your mind, because if that drops back to 49, which is still very good, but if it drops back to 49, he goes to being a top 120 player, which is very different from top 80 when you're drafting. Where would I look at him next season? Look, I think his role is very secure. He's a nice two-way player. He can hit threes. He's a decent rebounder. Healthy, no real injuries to this point in his career. So I think you're probably taking him. Well, there's a question. Would you take him or Michael Porter next year first in drafts? I think I'd go Christian Braun at this point, just because he has upside. I don't think Michael Porter does. So again, top 80, top 90, assuming nothing much changes here. Who do we want to look at? Westbrook. Well, I mean, he'll be almost 37. I thought he was a really good fit for Denver. Playoffs weren't great, especially that second series. He has moments, and I know we see highlights of him getting to the basket and making layups, but he missed a lot of open layups as well. The three-point shot is obviously a huge weakness in his game. He hits some, but he misses a lot. Free throws are, whatever. Would I draft him? Look, I think it's going to depend on whether they make any significant changes. If they run it back, he's probably the sixth man, and he's probably a last-round pick, just because he gets you those counting stats. He was 116th this year, 13 points, 5 rebounds, 5.5 assists, 1.3 steals. So if you don't care about percentages, you just want... Sort of a Draymondy kind of player, a little bit more upside offensively. Obviously not as much upside in terms of blocks, but yeah, like 13, 5 and 5 with a bit over a steal. That's okay. I think you can take him with a last round pick, but it will depend again on whether they make any significant changes. And then Jamal Murray, who I thought had a pretty good postseason. He was dealing with some injuries to close the year, but seemed to get healthy when it mattered. Had some big games. He finished this season as the 24th ranked player. Sort of flies under the radar there a little bit. Free throws are very good. Assists are fine. Like he's a 6 assists. Obviously with Jokic there, that's going to limit what he can do in that category. 1.3 steals. So that was a career high for him. Can he maintain that? I think he is who he is. So would I take him with the 24th pick in drafts next year? I don't think so. Top 30, yeah. Yeah, like middle of the third round. I guess early third, like if you're looking at 25, 26, 27, again, would depend on your build a little bit. I don't think there's a lot of upside for him. I think this is who he is. 20-ish points, 21 points, 6 assists, a steal, 2.5 threes. He's not going to push to be a top 10 player, a top 15 player. So if you want to play, if you've drafted, I don't know, like a LaMelo, if you've taken him with your second round pick, then maybe you just go Jamal Murray. He has had some injury concerns, though, the last couple of years, soft tissues, ankles. He played 59 games last year, 65 the year before, and this year I want to say he played, how did they play in the playoffs? 14, so 70, so 60, like 65 again, 67 games. So there's minor things going on, but nothing too significant. So yeah, again, we'll come down to what changes are made. Is there anyone that can push into fantasy relevance for Denver? That really depends on whether they let anyone go. Julian Strawther and Peyton Watson are the two obvious ones. Strawther had one good game in the playoffs. Peyton Watson has more upside for me because of the two-way ability. We've seen flashes, glimpses of what he can do, but he would need Michael Porter or Aaron Gordon probably to be out of the rotation or injured to have a shot at fantasy value. So I don't think so. Not at this point anyway. But we'll see. All right, that's all 4 teams. Next episode will be, 2 teams, I guess? Do I wait till the season is done? I might throw in another one and we'll just do the 2 teams and any news. There's not much in the way of news, though, if we're being honest. At the moment, but there will be another episode. Once the season's going, we'll have plenty of episodes, so looking forward to that. So we are done. You've been listening to Stuff It, a fantasy basketball podcast. I am Adam King. Again, go and find me on socials at AdamKing91. Go and find Old Man Squad at Old Man Squad. Dan Besbris at Dan Besbris. Go and find Noah, who's got his new show, Young Man Squad, at Noah Rubin 22. I should know that by now. I'm pretty sure it's at Noah Rubin 22. Thank you. That will do. We are done. See ya.